Good evening, everyone. My name is Xavier Higgs, and thank you for joining us. Tonight, the Los Angeles chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists is presenting a panel discussion called Just Doing My Job, Protecting the Agency versus the Public Interest. Before we get underway, just a quick note about us. Since 1938, SPJLA has committed to supporting Southern California journalists by ensuring they can carry out their jobs. Also, we are advocates for protecting First Amendment guarantees of freedom of speech and the press. You can find out more about us at spjla.org. Tonight's program is special because we have 5 of the best journalists and media relation experts in Southern California. Let's begin with our moderator, Benjamin A. Davis. He is an associate professor of broadcast and digital journalism at California State University, Northridge. I think we know them as CSUN. He is a board member emeritus on the Princeton University's Prize in Race Relations. Professor Davis was also a member of the launch team for MSNBC.com. He was an interactive producer and editor. He also served as Washington editor and an executive producer for NPR's Special Projects Department. Professor Davis has won numerous awards for journalism, including 2 Alfred I. DuPont Awards for broadcast, one for reporting, the other as executive producer. He graduated from Whittier College and Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. Professor Davis also studied international relations at the University of Copenhagen. He also taught journalism at Rutgers University and Florida A&M University. Go Rattlers. Good evening, Professor Davis, and thank you for moderating this discussion. How are you, my friend?
Doing pretty good. Thank you very much, Xavier. And thanks to the SPJLA for inviting me to moderate this panel of all women. And I know this is Women's History Month, but I always keep in mind that also last month was Women's History Month and next month is Women's History Month. And that's the way everybody should think about such months and our women as well. I think a lot of what will be talked about this evening is fairness. What is fair for the public information officers to expect of the media, and what is fair for the media to expect of public information officers. But during the process, we should learn what is really fair for the public and its need to know critical information. It's no secret that police and government agencies have a love-hate relationship with the press. And it's no secret that the press has a love-hate relationship with the government. But somewhere in between, there's a need for the public to be well informed. So tonight, we should get a better understanding of how PIO experts interact with the media, and we should also get a clear idea of how the press interacts with the government, in this case, the PIOs. Before I introduce our panelists, I just want to remind the audience, people who are out there, that you can submit questions to the chat box. Claudia Peschiutta. Claudia is an award-winning journalist who's been covering news in Southern California for more than 2 decades. She started her career as a print reporter at a group of weeklies in the San Gabriel Valley. At the Glendale News, she covered business and politics. One of her biggest stories was covering what was then the most expensive House race in history, Adam Schiff's successful bid to unseat incumbent James Rogan. She was also a general assignment reporter at KFWB-AM. In 2006, she returned to local news as a reporter at KNX Radio. Right now, she works at KPCC as a daily news editor. And she has a reputation for asking tough questions and seeking to hold leaders and government leaders accountable. Lisa Derderian has served as the City of Pasadena Public Information Officer and Emergency Management Coordinator since 2018. And prior to that, starting in 2003, she worked out of the Pasadena Fire Department as the Emergency Manager and Fire PIO. Most of her work in the last 2 years has been dedicated to COVID relief, response, and recovery efforts. That's mainly because Pasadena is one of 3 cities in Southern California that has its own health department. And before her work with the city of Pasadena, she worked for the American Red Cross for 7 years. Susan Hirasuna. She's anchored weekend news and reported for Fox 11 for the past 2 decades. Her journalism has been recognized by the Los Angeles Emmy Awards, the Golden Mikes, and the New England Emmy Awards. In 2012, she traveled to Japan under a fellowship to report on recovery and rebuilding efforts after the Sanriku earthquake and the tsunami that followed. Kerri Webb is the Director of Public Information and Government Relations for the El Camino Community College District in Torrance. Since 2013, she's also been an adjunct professor at El Camino, teaching and writing journalism while there. In the past 20 years, Kerri served as the Public Information Officer at Englewood, Christian Center, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and the LA County Probation Department. This is a pretty impressive board panel that we have here, and the members of the Fourth Estate and the members of the government be able to give us some good piece of information about how things really work. Before we get started, I want to give the panelists a chance to tell us a little bit about their jobs, describe their job to us. Let's start with Kerri. Kerri, do you mind?
Sure. Hi. Thank you for inviting me to be a member of this panel. So many of you, I followed your careers and I've worked with you in my capacity as public information officer for the County of Los Angeles. I really am humbled and honored to be a member of this panel tonight. Thank you so much. I am currently, just as you said, the Director of Public Information and Government Relations at El Camino College. And in that capacity, I serve as the PIO, Public Affairs Director, as well as the legislative counselor, so to speak, for the college. So working within the community, within our legislative representatives and elected officials. Thank you again.
Right. Lisa, what do you do?
Good evening, and thank you. It's an honor to be included in the panel this evening. I have been in the city manager's office as a public information officer at Pasadena City Hall for the last 3 years. And prior to that, worked at the fire department for, I think, 16 years in public information. So it's me, and I have a social media specialist who's great that works with me, and we represent the city. And during COVID, we've been doing a majority of the health department outreach too. So that's definitely been a challenge, but very rewarding.
And Susan, can you describe your job to us?
I have the good fortune to do 2 jobs. So I do anchor the weekend news on Fox 11 News. It's been 26 years. I can't believe that. I run into people now who say, I grew up watching you. And I believe them now. And then I get to report in the field as well. So then that means that I've had lots of opportunities to talk to Lisa and work alongside Claudia. Claudia, I didn't know that you changed positions, so I miss you. I miss you out there in the field.
Miss you too. Miss the field.
Great. And Claudia.
Yes.
Yes.
So thanks for having me. Yes, I was a field reporter for many years, and now I'm a daily news editor at KPCC, which means I'm working with other people who are doing stories and trying to, help them improve their reporting and, teaching newer journalists how to ask the tough questions.
Great, thanks. Now, in preparing for this, I spoke with a veteran PIO officer and I spoke with a veteran journalist. But I asked the veteran PIO person if they had a wish list of things that they wished that the news media would do or knew about. And it was a very long list. I also asked the veteran journalist the same thing. And it also was a very long list. Some of the things surprised me in terms of the information, but I think both sides, it was exhaustive. But what I want to start with you guys. We'll start with Claudia. Claudia, what's on your wish list for the PIOs in terms of things you wish that they
Okay, well, number one, for a PIO, I need them to be easily reachable. I need them to be responsive. I mean, like you're not doing your job if you're not doing that. If I see a press release without any contact information, crumple it up, trash. Don't care. So yeah, and you know, a lot of times, you know, PIOs may not have the information readily available, but just let me know when I can expect to get that. Like, I'm working on it, I'll get back to you in half an hour. Cool. So then I don't have to keep calling and emailing you and wasting my time and your time. You know, Lisa's probably had to deal with some of this, but sometimes you're at a situation that's developing, a fire, a shooting, whatever. And so, you know, when reporters show up at the scene, you want to get an initial briefing. Okay, here's what we have. Like, you know, there are at least some basic details that are available. Come out, give that briefing, and then say, okay, we're going to give you an update in an hour. Fine. So then everybody knows like what they're dealing with, and yeah, those are the top things. I'll think of more as we're talking.
Okay, I'm sure you will, Kerri, but don't most PIOs already know what she's saying?
Yes. And and Claudia, I don't know if you remember working with me. You were one of the last reporters I dealt with right before COVID was really taking off.
Yeah, I do. Like, I don't. Were we dealing face to face? But I don't know. Yes, I do remember.
No, we weren't. We
No,
were
okay.
just going into remote world,
Yeah.
and I was I was telling Xavier this. Claudia is really intense. She was going to get her story. She was going to get the statement. And I swear I already had put my letter of resignation in at the probation department about a month before COVID hit. So after having dealt with Claudia, I was like, you know what, that was a good decision. I'm glad.
And you know, it's never a personal thing. I do feel like it's a huge responsibility to inform the public. And so, you know, we got to push.
and I get it, and I appreciate that. I have a journalism background. I was a print journalist, print media for many years before a lot of folks say, you know, went over to the dark side. But I get it. I understand you're on deadline. This is Los Angeles. It's the second largest media market. So everyone is in competition to get that information. As a PIO, I understand that the reporters who are trying to get the information that I'm putting out are from different types of media. I am working with print media. They have different demands and different needs versus broadcast media, which is also radio and television. Each one of those forms of media have their specific needs. So where one person needs a statement or a quote, another one needs a sound bite. And so a lot of what we deal with as PIOs, we know that you need the information. We know that you are on deadline. Those of us who've been PIOs in the Los Angeles market, we know your deadlines. We know when you're live. We know when you're about to either go to press, you're about to file a story, or we know that it's 3:30 and you're about to go live soon. So we're working with your deadlines. However, if we say, give me 15 minutes, you know, I'm usually working on getting a statement approved. And that is government, that's bureaucracy, and that's painful because I can't go out and speak on behalf of my agency without that statement approved.
If we can just elaborate a little bit more on the fact that you're working for government. So behind the scenes, sometimes there are things taking place that the reporters don't know about that are delaying getting information to them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and for the most part, because of my relationship with media personnel, I'll tell you, I'll say, look, I have a statement. It's ready to go, but I either have to get it approved by whoever the CEO of my agency is. You know, when I was at the probation department, the CEO is the chief. Have to make sure that the chief signs off. Have to make sure that county council signed off. Have to make sure that our lawyers are happy. So there are a lot of running around, phone calls, emails, text messages going behind the scenes. And
Lisa, what about you
time,
behind the scenes?
Kerri hit the nail on the head exactly. We're always the first to be asked, but the last to know typically. I'm very fortunate that I have been in my role for so many years. So I have great relationships with the media. And they have my cell phone number, because often in our jobs, I'm sure Kerri will agree, and others, that you'll get like a police officer that just got promoted, and oh, by the way, you're now the PIO. Assuming they know what to do, because people don't really understand exactly what goes on. As Kerri mentioned too, I have a whole process internally. You have a statement ready, you can give it out. And I'm like, Kerri, I will let media know those I know and trust, just so they have it and they're ready to go with it, even if there's some slight edits once it goes through the attorney's office and city manager's office. But my biggest challenge is, training internally to let them know what a PIO really does, and that the more information they can give me, the better off I am in trying to put a statement together for their approval, instead of waiting until we get the inquiries, being proactive and trying to work in advance of getting the media calls.
Well, I'm curious, Susan, we'll use you as an example. Do you think that they're aware of your deadline, or is sensitive to your deadline as they're going through the behind the scenes mechanisms with the government?
Well, for sure, there are some PIOs that are better than others. Lisa is so great. The last time I contacted her, she goes, "No, I don't work for the fire department anymore. However, let me give you this information." I'm like, oh my gosh, you are a godsend. You're just the greatest.
Oh, thank
and
you.
sometimes, to speak to actually what all three of you sort of alluded to, sometimes even having just a contact, so you can say, like, say you need to go on the air sooner rather than later, like, TV will do the what we call wall-to-wall coverage for a fire or whatever. Even if it's something as simple as, I made the contact and they say they will have information for me in 15 minutes. Even that is information that I can at least use in that moment. And then it puts it, in my head that I got to make the call back. So I appreciate a good PIO. And, there is a joke, and I don't know if Claudia would agree with this. The joke is that PIOs need us, but they don't need us when they don't want us. In other words,
Yes.
with police, with police stations, when police department has we got to put this information out about a killer on the loose. That's all well and good. You want us to be the to promulgate that information. But when we call you for a specific piece of information on a story, maybe it's something it's not breaking, but maybe it's something we're working on, and then it's like crickets. We don't always get a response to that kind of thing. Certainly not in a timely fashion every time.
Claudia, do you think that relationships have a lot to do with that, in terms of the relationship with
like
the PIO?
in any industry, relationships totally matter. Like Lisa said, sometimes, like with somebody that I know well, I might give them something ahead of time, before it's absolutely ready, so then they know what to expect, like they can start working with that. And that does happen sometimes with PIOs. And then sometimes I've dealt with PIOs who I literally think, and this is mostly like crime stuff, are like, don't tell me. So then they can come out and be like, I don't know. And I've certainly gotten into it with some PIOs about stuff like that. Even with like higher up officials, like, like chiefs and stuff, sometimes they'll say like, you'll ask something and they'll say, we don't want to jeopardize the investigation or whatever. And I'm like, okay, do you actually know this information, and you're withholding it, or you don't know? And that's why you're saying that. And I've literally had somebody say, yeah, okay, we don't know. And I'm like, just say that then. Like, we don't have that information right now. Fine, totally fine.
Yeah.
I got another good example, and this happened recently where, an unfortunate situation where a truck goes into an apartment building, kills 2 people. This was just my story yesterday. Call Long Beach Police to get the update. I'm like, look, you got the car. Surely you know who this is. Are you close to an arrest? Did you find the guy? It's all part of the investigation, ma'am. We don't have any new information. I'm like, just even, it's just, it's kind of nutty. Oh, in other words, this makes you look bad because you have the vehicle. Surely you know exactly who this driver is. So now it makes you look bad because now we're going on 24 hours and you haven't made an arrest. That's
Kerri?
not either one of you ladies. That's not Kerri or Lisa.
Okay, so we have the wrong panel then.
No. I do want to address that a little bit. And Susan, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, and I saw your story last night, and the truck was inside of the building. So it's like, duh, something, but a lot of this, I mean, sometimes as a PIO, you just have to be, well, yeah, I see the same thing that you see too. But in law enforcement, and I'm sure Lisa can back me up on this as well. In law enforcement, when you have an active crime scene, and the two of us, I'm sure we've babysat some crime scenes for media, the suspect, and you're going to hate this, and I don't like having to say it because it's very trite, the suspect is innocent until proven guilty. We can't say anything about the suspect just yet if it is an ongoing investigation. It pains me to even say that on the record when I am being interviewed, but at that exact time, I can't confirm anything about an ongoing active investigation until it's been cleared by all of the various investigators in that scene. So I've always just been honest and told the reporter, you know how this goes. This isn't your first rodeo. It's an
If the reporter knows plenty of information about the suspect that they want to get it confirmed through you, if you withheld that information because of internal procedures, is that good? Is that kosher, or is that what you basically have to do?
I don't like using the word withholding.
Okay.
We're not withholding any information.
Okay, what's the
We are
word?
waiting until we can confirm it because I
Okay.
want to be able to provide that information. The public absolutely has a right to know,
Mhm.
and ultimately it's for the health and safety of the community to know what's going on. But that suspect, as well as the victims, have a right to due process and they have a right to confidentiality. There are victims who don't want to be identified. There are victims who don't want to be associated with the situation. I have to wait until I have confirmation as to what I can say. I don't like using the word withholding. Withholding has some nefarious, feeling to it, and that's not the situation. It's having to have the process work itself out.
So
We're
Lisa,
protecting the
go ahead.
investigation.
We're protecting the investigation, absolutely.
I just want to jump in here with something like something I've run into, is an agency has made an arrest and they won't give me the first 9 lines of the police report, and they are legally obligated to do so. So like once you've made an arrest, you've booked someone, like we should be able to get their name, age, that kind of information. And the other thing, in terms of people, being innocent until proven guilty, I mean, a lot of times I won't even use somebody's name unless, it's like a really well-known person or something until at least they're charged, because it doesn't take much to arrest someone. And then once you put them out there as a suspect, even if you say allegedly or whatever, like it's really hard to take that back. So, once they've been charged, at least prosecutors have taken a look at the evidence, whatever. And all the time, like police will say, this is preliminary information, like there'll be a shooting and people will say, well, how many shots were fired? Okay. You know what? Like no one should expect an investigator to tell you, an hour after a shooting, this many shots were fired, like that. You're not going to get that. So I think, like, people who've been doing this for a while have reasonable expectations about what information they can and cannot get. What I've run into sometimes though is like, police may not have information and they will try to make it look like I'm asking a question that's going to jeopardize their investigation. And I mean, it's like, I know what I'm doing. So it's like, if you don't know, just say that. Don't make it sound like I'm trying to like mess up the investigation. Yeah, I mean, I totally understand stuff like sometimes you do hold on to information because there are witness identification issues. Like, you're going to talk to different people and you want to make sure that the things match up. Oh, you know what? Somebody, sorry, I just noticed in the chat that there is a question in here. I don't know, Benjamin, I'm flagging that for you.
Okay. You can go ahead and jump on the question. Which one?
Oh, okay. Well, it says, what's a reporter to do when the PIO is clearly withholding information or lying about intel that is common knowledge, as in shared by multiple witnesses or caught on camera? I'm trying to think, and maybe Susan, can you think of an example where, someone straight up lied? Okay, well, I just thought of something that just came up, but it doesn't exactly fit this, but you go ahead and then I'll come back.
I wasn't going to say lie. I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure these days, because everybody has a camera, in their hands and Nest and Ring. And so, yeah, I guess what is happening more often is you can come up with your own narrative based on, the security videos that you've been privy to. Like, for example, when, what's her name? She's a Real Housewife in Encino, when her house is broken into and they clearly came in the back window because you could see how broken it was. We got that from Skyfox overhead. But my point is that initially, I think what I got from LAPD didn't even come close to confirming that which we could just see. So is that a failing? I don't call that withholding, and I don't call that lying. But yeah, sometimes there can be sort of, less information from the official and more information that you pick up because you've seen it or you've talked to witnesses on the scene. But the witnesses get it wrong too. So you always have to be sort of, just a little suspicious or a little cagey about what they say. In my case, I don't know if you find this, Claudia, but in my case, I feel like, are you just telling me this because you want me to be on TV, or did you really witness this?
Well, and part of the problem is if officials don't come out and say something, people will fill the vacuum with whatever they can find sometimes. And that's not always the right thing to do. I remember covering a killing in Hollywood, and this woman was going around saying, oh yeah, I heard it, I saw it, and this many shots and whatever. And I was like, something is off, like, this is not sounding right. And I know that a few stations went with it and I didn't, because I was like, I don't really believe this. And then it turned out that it was not correct what that person was saying. We're getting lots of other questions in here in the chat.
As you prepare, I just want to, we can take questions out of the chat whenever we want, but I want to follow up part of that with Lisa. Lisa, have you ever gone to your agency bosses and said, look, the reporters all know, and they're trying to get it out. The public knows, but we haven't put out a statement yet. Let's get something out. Have you ever had to push them to get a statement out for something that was obvious?
Often, unfortunately, and it's because we live in a day and age of social media, as we talked about. We have people that will use their cell phones, take video of an incident, give it to the reporters, but not to the police. So and then that's a fine line of, do the reporters use it? They want to respect the fact that they don't want it in the police hands. So, but that's when I'll go to my city manager or council members and say, it's out there. We're getting comments. We need to put a statement together.
Do they ever say that you don't understand the politics of the situation? Does that ever come into play in terms of when you're going to release information?
Yeah, it's more that it can wait. Let's not rush it. I get that often. Let's not rush it. But again, we've all been doing this for so long that you may not necessarily be rushing it, but what you want to say because it's happened before and they may be new in their role. So you're trying to explain that we're not rushing, but we need to get ahead of it. Otherwise, it's going to spin and have its own cycle, on the social media and everywhere else. So it's to protect our own city. The more we're transparent and get it out there. And that's what that's been my big focus is we need to be as transparent as we can. With COVID, everyone thinks in Pasadena, having our own health department, it was pretty quiet and we didn't really emphasize the fact that we had it. Now with COVID, we're in the forefront of it. And you should see the comments that we get. And that's where it's, no, we need to clarify. We need to, no, nobody will believe it. It's one, I'm like, no, we need to do this rumor control. That's been happening a lot the last few years.
Hey, Claudia, you want to grab a question out of the chat? If not, I have one.
Yeah, okay. So we got one. Be interested to know if there are long-term solutions and or workarounds that reporters pursue if they find they're dealing with an agency that is not especially helpful. This happens a lot. And, an agency is made up of a lot of different people. So you're always going to know some people who are helpful, but I'm like, sorry, PIOs, but often I will tell other reporters, like, don't bother with media relations, go like straight to the investigator, the council person, this, and sometimes I find, and it depends because everyone's different, but let's say I want to talk to a certain council member and their aide will be like, so-and-so's not available. Well, I'll text so-and-so directly and they'll call me and I'm like, did your aide even tell you that I had asked to talk to you? For whatever reason, that request was not made. So yes, again, it's all about building relationships. So when you're dealing with an agency that is known for not being helpful, you build relationships with individuals in that agency.
Kerri, I guess you have comment on that.
Absolutely. It's a dance, and it's about establishing a relationship with the representative. I know for a fact that there are some PIOs who are notorious for not getting back, and just like any other journalist, your reputation is your equity. That how your name is used and made synonymous is really what makes you useful in this industry.
Some PIOs, go ahead, I'm sorry, keep going.
So if you're known as someone who does not respond to inquiries, you do not pick up the phone, heaven forbid you lie, that's easy to identify right away. Your reputation will render you ineffective.
Sometimes can a PIO not get back, not because of ignorance, but because they don't like the reporter?
Ooh.
If that was the case, then I wouldn't be speaking in Los Angeles sometimes.
I ran into that, and
Yeah.
I have one reporter that I will not work with, and I've made it known to that station. I literally had a piece of paper in my hand after the camera was off, and I was reading a statement, not knowing he had a camera, and took a photo of it. So then I go home and I happen to turn it on, and I see that statement enlarged. That was only supposed to take like a sentence out of that. I called the assignment desk, was not happy. They removed it from the feature broadcast. But my point is, I made it very clear I will not deal with that reporter again.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Our reporter,
That's not Claudia or me.
okay.
But you guys are my favorites.
You know what? Can I just tell a quick story here? This reminds me, one time I was interviewing a spokesperson for a fire department, not Lisa. And they were talking about someone who'd been electrocuted. And they made some comment like, oh, this person was like burnt to a crisp or something like that. On the record, like it was in the middle of an interview that I was very clearly recording. And yes, it was not the most sensitive comment, and I used it and they got really mad at me. And I was like, but you said it, like you said it in the middle of an interview. And they were like, well, you should have known that. And I'm like, no, you should have known. And it turned into a big thing. Yeah, that I like what Lisa is talking about. I mean, listen, like, ethics matter on both sides. So,
Lisa and Kerri, do PIOs, and let's not say you two, but other PIOs, the new PIOs, do they understand that journalists are involved in a constitutionally charged profession? Or is it just another job, someone that's coming at them with questions?
Yeah, I personally don't think they understand the magnitude. Yeah, and I don't think a lot of leadership even understands that. Yeah, it's a challenge to educate them even on 409.5, access to media. I run across this every time we have a fire incident, police incident. Okay, media standing. I'm like, no, they can go there. No, they can't. I said, no, they can go there. If it's not a crime scene, I have to sit there, and I literally have a piece of paper in my folder, and I show them what that means, because these are things you don't learn about, and then you're challenged. So it's important that there's some type of orientation. Like I said, you get police and fire notorious for it, and I love them dearly, but it's okay. You're now a lieutenant. You're a public information officer. Good luck. They don't. That training is so important, and that's where your organization is so beneficial to help with stuff. And I hope now that things are opening up more with COVID, that we can get back to training. And the reporters out there have been so beneficial and so kind to us, because I put together some training for our PIO team, and it's really helped a lot.
I feel like I've had many, many experiences going out into the field or making phone calls where it's so clear to me. I'm talking to somebody who has maybe, 2 to 3 years experience in the department. They barely know how their department works, and now they have to deal with the media, and I'm asking all these questions, and I don't know is the stock phrase or some version of that. They might not say I don't know, because that would be a failure, but they do basically not give any kind of real information, and it's clear they don't really know that they should get the information or have some information, even if it's just passing information. I will tell you, LAPD, the media relations department, is the last place I will call. If I have to call LAPD, I'll do it just because a manager might say, and did you call LAPD media relations? Yeah, I did. It was my last call. Because they're usually so worthless.
Wow.
All right. Oops, I wasn't supposed to say that out loud.
Burn. Okay.
Is the fact that a lot of the newer PIOs, and I guess, darn it, I'm one of the old school ones now. Yeah, we're one of those now. A lot of the new school PIOs don't have a journalism background. I started off as a reporter, as a news reporter, so I understand media law. I understand constitutionality. I understand what the rights and the privileges are, and I understand that that is what reporters are working with. And just like someone said in the chat, that's your sword and shield. That's what you've got working for you, and allows you entree into a lot of these cases and situations. Just like you said, Susan, a lot of these folks are probably promoting within the ranks of their government agency, and now you're the spokesperson, whatever that means, and they're having a tough time.
And there's still a public that's in need of information quickly and with clarity. I did have a PIO that told me that it would be good if reporters could spend the day with them to see what they have to go through behind the scenes. But it sounds like you're sort of saying that maybe PIOs should spend some time with reporters to understand their demands. Am I correct?
Absolutely. One of the best educations that I received as a PIO, a civilian PIO for the Sheriff's Department, Steve Whitmore was for you OG people, Steve Whitmore was my media advisor. He insisted that I went on ride-alongs with various news media personnel, and knowing, even having my background in print, from a smaller demographic market, I learned what LA media needed and what they were working with, and the obstacles and the demands on their time and what their story needed to be. It was a great insight.
In a city that has a large Latino population, isn't it almost necessary to have press conferences that have a Spanish-speaking PIO there? Lisa, I'll let you take that.
No, I agree 100%. And our city has a access and functional needs coordinator too. So any public safety press conference will have sign language too. That's very important. But yeah, you have to look at the demographics of your audience when we're putting out information, press releases, newsletters, whatever the case may be.
When
Yeah,
was the
and
last time, have you ever used a translator or a Spanish-speaking person at your news conferences?
yeah, I think it was during the windstorms. It goes back several years
Okay.
when we did that because it impacted our school district. And so that had a large Latino population. So we used it for that. And the other thing, not to get off topic, but I'd be curious too for the reporters. I don't know if you're required to have social media accounts or it's just a volunteer thing, but I find that interesting how that aspect works with the social media, getting the information out too. And I know I deviated from the original questions. So I
That's
apologize, but
no problem, yeah.
if I don't say it now, I'm going to forget it.
Yep. I get it. What about you, Kerri? Have you ever been involved in a news conference where you had a Spanish-speaking person there as part of the staff?
Yes, at the sheriff's department, we have what's called the film and media projects part of the sheriff's headquarters bureau, or sheriff's information bureau now. They went back to SIV. And there are a team of PIOs who are our go-to whenever we need to translate into Spanish or any other languages based on the needs of that presser. Same thing at probation department. We had go-to officers who would translate for us. Not going to say that 100% of the time we had that. There were a couple of pressers that I coordinated, and Telemundo and Univision were there, and they were like, we're ready for the interview. Do you have someone who can speak Spanish for us? And I actually did not. And we conducted the interview in English, but I knew the perfectionist in me was thinking, this could have been so much better if I had someone actually speaking Spanish regarding this case, regarding this situation, without it having to be dubbed over. So that was another thing as a PIO that I knew was a need for Spanish language media.
Do you think it will be changing over time or will stay the way it is?
It better change.
Okay.
It absolutely better change.
PIOs, what do you guys do with the knucklehead reporters, the ones that are rude? And I'm sure you've run across them. Lisa, do you put a rude reporter in his or her place on the spot, or do you do it afterwards like you did before? You call the assignment editor.
Yeah, I called the assignment editor only because I didn't know until it aired that he actually did that. And I think because I've been doing so many years, I don't really run across too many rude reporters per se. Sometimes you get the rogue camera folks.
Claudia, are you laughing or just smiling? Were you laughing when she said that, Claudia? Or was I misreading?
Oh, when you're talking about rude reporters, I don't like them either.
Yeah, I don't get too many. I get some that are very they're hurried and they need to get things. And the reporters that their hearts are really into it and they want to do the research. And then there's others that they'll literally just cut and paste or read what you sent without trying to get any sound bites or anything to make it more personalized. So you kind of learn the MOs of all of them. But that was the first reporter, like I said, that I had the issues with. Prior to that, it's I have great relationships, and a lot of them have turned into friendships. Mr. Higgs will attest. If he's still on there, he'll attest to that too.
Lisa, can you zoom in on that word you use, research? There are times that reporters need to have done more research on a particular story, and it shows in their questions. And is that irritating, or does it make your job tougher?
I mean, I appreciate the fact if you just give them a press release and they just want you to read off the press release, that's one thing. But I appreciate when they go beyond and they ask additional questions based on what they're seeing in the press release. So it makes me think on my feet quickly to address it, especially if it's live. That's happened before. But otherwise, it's good conversation to think beyond what's just in the press release and ask the questions. And some questions I'm like, wow, I didn't think of that. I should have put that in the press release. So it's a two-way communication that's really helpful, and I think the public appreciates it too.
if a reporter is asking someone to just go off what's on a press release, they're not a reporter.
Right,
And
right.
what kills me is when I'm at a news conference and somebody is asking stuff that's already been asked and answered. And I'm like, are you even paying attention to what's happening here? So yes, I mean, for all of us, we need to take our work more seriously than we take ourselves. And there are some reporters who, you know, are really more interested in like putting on a big show or whatever, and not so much in getting information for the public. And we are all here to serve the public. It's not about us. It's about the public. So
I love it when, you know, you have a presser and reporters check each other. You know, they will literally say, she just answered that. She just said that. You know, what are you paying attention? And, you know, and it's actually kind of entertaining a little bit.
I was going to give an excuse, not for me, because to answer Lisa's question about social media accounts, yeah, most of the stations will tell you you have to have Twitter and Instagram, and you need to feed it. I'm not very good at it. So I'm not the reporter that didn't listen to the last 5 questions because I was feeding my Instagram or my Twitter feed, and then have to ask that question that was already asked and answered. So that might explain why there are a couple, you know, reporters who perhaps are answering or asking rather a redundant question. And I wish I was better at the whole social media thing, but I am not. It's not my favorite thing to do. I'd rather focus on the story and get it done, make slot, as we say, you know, make it easier for the photographer who also edits, and me, you know, and then maybe I'll get to the Twitter later.
So many questions in the chat. Can I throw a couple of these out,
Yes,
Benjamin?
by all
Okay.
means.
All right. For the PIOs, plenty of newsrooms put reporters and photographers through racial sensitivity training after George Floyd. Did this happen in the PIO world too?
You want to?
I mean, real quick, as we go through citywide training, nothing specific for PIO. I mean, I would hope that I would learn so much just from what I've been seeing, what's been going on. But citywide, we go through training. PIO, that would be a great thing for our team to do.
You said it would be. This is something that right now it's citywide, but you think maybe the PIO department itself should go through it exclusively?
Yes, we have a city PIO team. Every department has representation. Some it's other duties as assigned. But like today we had a meeting and we'll have usually a guest speaker come in for 20 minutes. That would be a great topic to address in the future.
Well, you're talking about a formal process though. That's not formal. You mean that maybe we should have a formal process for sensitivity training?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, citywide, we do it for day to day, but
Right.
specifically for PIOs, I think that would be a good training. I mean, I look to you guys as the experts if you think that's a good recommendation too. I don't see why there's no negative aspect to doing that. The more training, the better, especially in the climate today that we live in. It's very important.
Kerri, do you think
Sensitivity, so that you don't say something like burn to a crisp or whatever.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Cover a gamut of things, right?
Well,
Kerri?
on the county level, in full transparency, I haven't been with the county for over a year. I left the county in 2020, but I was there for 14 years. And county PIOs did go through sensitivity training and social media training. Susan actually made me remember that. It can be improved upon. I will absolutely put that as a suggestion. It absolutely can be improved upon.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. I want to know about the follow-up questions. Is there an art to avoiding the follow-up question from a persistent reporter? Kerri, that's definitely your answer. Go ahead.
Please, whatever it is, don't put it out there.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you all my.
Isn't that called a spin? You spin it.
No. Okay, let's just be for real. Let's be honest. And we've been honest all along. There is a dance. There is a dance. You know, everyone knows it. everyone kind of can, especially reporters who've been around the block a few times, they can kind of tell when someone is tap dancing, tiptoeing around. Oh goodness, all the PIOs, I love us, but reporters ask the question again, and we're going to give the answer again. And I don't want to say that it's an art, but there is a rhythm to staying at. I'm doing it now. There's a rhythm at staying on the statement, staying at the message, knowing what you can and can't say, and sticking to the script. I train my officers by just stick to the talking points.
All right, and then I'm going to put this out for the reporters. If one of your colleagues asks a good question and they don't get an answer and the person tries to move on, you follow up and you back up your colleague.
Yeah.
Like, keep asking the question. Sometimes there are things you're not going to get, period. But if you should get an answer, don't just let that drop.
It's happened. I've had that happen to me in pressers where I thought that I successfully tap danced around something, and then another reporter said, "Oh, but let's just ask that." In my mind, I'm cussing you out, but I'm going to answer the question as best as I possibly can.
Late in his administration, the White House press corps pretty much started taking on that type of approach to questions that weren't fully answered. Lisa, how did you stick to the script when you consistently get a follow-up or follow-up questions that you can't go any further on?
Yeah, and that's where I think experience plays a big part too, because it took me many years. Because then sometimes you get comfortable afterwards where you got the hot mic, I'll call it, for lack of a better term, I guess, where the reporter will talk to you off camera. The mic is still going. I've caught that a few times, but you're more comfortable. So you say things you may not say when the camera's not on you, not realizing the mic's still on. So when I do media training to our PIOs, I always bring that up too. But again, that's where that trust comes into play, and you can have those conversations afterwards. But I think just from doing it so many years, when I'm done with what I am able to say, we're concluding the conference or the conversation.
Have you ever, I don't want to pick on the PIOs here, but I just want to know, have you guys, but we'll definitely get a response from the reporters, I think, but have you ever tried to tailor a story and hope that the reporter is going to follow suit? And other than the press release, have you ever tried to release information in a way that you would hope it would be reported closer to the way you put it out and it's been stuck to? Do you try to tailor news stories?
Yeah, I think that's where the relationships come in, to where you can have more of a casual conversation, to let them know, here's what I really want to get out, and I need your help. And that's where I think it's really beneficial to have those off.
Sorry to interrupt. I thought all politics, any politician, their PIO will spin and will make it their own narrative, as opposed to, and this may also speak to what was spoken to already about how, but we already know stuff. We know stuff from either, an FBI document that's been released or whatever, but you want your politician to look better, so you're putting the spin on it, which doesn't comport with other information, but that's your job, I thought. I mean, I just presume that that's how a publicist for a politician would work. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. That's Kerri's contemplating.
Yes, he's thinking.
I don't like the word tailored, though.
Okay.
And maybe that's just
you
me.
don't like a lot of the words I've thrown out. Withholding and not tailored.
I'm an English professor, and some of these
It's okay. No, that's what this is about,
know.
actually. We're gonna learn these things. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I don't like the word tailored, but then again, I write the press release, and that's the message that I'm trying to get across. That's essentially the story. Now, if you are going to pick up my press release and you want to dig a little deeper into into different angles of the story, I absolutely respect that and I support that. Ultimately, there's a message that I want to get across. And if you can help me get that message across, then we work together. If you absolutely disagree with the message and you think that the message is not beneficial, then that's when you engage me and find out more information about, dig a little deeper. I'm not adverse to that. I'm not afraid of that. I appreciate that. You're trying to get more information and you're trying to build the story out, perhaps maybe even more so than my press release. I respect that.
Can I just bring up like the thing that comes to mind as we talk about this is, when law enforcement agencies use the term officer involved shooting, as a reporter, I would never use that term. Either police shot someone, someone shot police, they shot at each other. Like officer involved shooting says nothing. And that to me is just a sanitized term to not say police shot someone. So yeah, a lot of people will not use that term.
Yeah.
Why is that way? Why is it that way? Kerri, Lisa, why officer involved shooting instead of a police officer shot someone?
Kerri, you got a better background for that, but I just know that's like, I don't want to say standard terminology, but that's, I know, been used for so many years.
Yeah. A lot of it is standard terminology. It's police speak. It's kind of our job as the PIO, especially if we're a civilian PIO, to make it less police speak.
And you get pushback, I suppose, right?
Sure, I'm not going to come out on the record and say that officer so and so shot someone. I'm not going to say that as the PIO for a law enforcement agency.
But can you say that a police officer shot someone as opposed to officer involved shooting?
Probably not. I'm no longer with law enforcement. I'm with the college now.
Right.
But when I was in law enforcement, no.
So we're dealing with different behind the scenes rules that exist for, I would say, a politician and his public relations agent person and an institution like the police department. There are different rules, hierarchies in terms of how information is released. Lisa, you've worked on both sides. Are you able to comment on the hierarchy behind the release of or approval of information to be released to the public?
Yeah, and that's where I think officer involved shooting, you'll use that reference as more generic, because if you say officer shot, I don't, to me, it just, this is me personally, like implies the guilt. So they want to stay away from that at first. Whether it's the truth or not, they implies the officer is automatically guilty. So I think with the sensitivity, when we get, our own police department has a public information officer. He's been in that role for several years now, very well trained, but again, he still needs to go through a police chief. Putting anything out, even a press release today on our COVID and the mask requirements, has to go through our health officer, then goes to our assistant city manager, then goes to our council members before it goes out. So yes, no matter what the topic is, there's always that chain of command before it can be released.
I'm sorry. Can I just jump in here real quick? I just want to point out, like, and so Lisa was saying, if you say an officer shot someone, it implies guilt. It goes the other way too. And you don't often hear police agencies saying there was an officer involved shooting and an officer was hit. It will be, no, this suspect shot this officer. So, so you see like why the term officer involved shooting doesn't work. The other thing I want to point out is that often like police agencies will just come out and say, if officers open fire at someone, that person is called the suspect. And like the media just accepts that. Okay, but like suspected of what? Like you got to tell me what this person is suspected of, because just because they were fired upon does not mean that they did something to merit that. So yeah, and that's our responsibility as reporters to push back on like, okay, you're calling them a suspect, tell me why.
Kerri, I'm trying to imagine you using that very same argument to your bosses when you were at the sheriff's department. You probably have. And the response would have been?
What's the question that a reporter wants to know what the use of suspect
A
is
more clear definition of suspect,
Mhm.
one that's publicly palatable. Yes.
Um, at the sheriff's department, it was a little different than at probation, because we had a lot more officer involved, active shooting situations at the sheriff's department. We were kind of told to stick to what the incident commander told us, um, that what took place. We were pretty much told to stick to that.
So Susan, if you report what they stuck to, in other words, the information they put out, do you somehow lose credibility with the public if that is not enough information for the public? I can't hear you.
I was a bit distracted, so you're going to have to repeat the question because Beverly White put in a very good point, and that is person of interest is another one of those sort of, nondescript descriptions. But ask your question again, please.
Well, if they have to, if the police department has to stick to the script and put out information, and then you report what they put out, if it is not enough information, do you lose credibility with the public?
Sometimes you get what you get. I mean, it's unfortunate, but we're on a deadline, a time deadline. Very rarely if I call the producer and go, I don't really have very much. This is what I have. And, and I've called everyone and we got to the scene late, so there's no one to talk to. Every once in a while they'll go, okay, not enough to go on. We're just scotching your stories. Your story's dead. It doesn't happen very often. So there is the pressure to go and make slot, whatever it is, even if you have just the barest of information, even if it's just, we're here, this happened, and it's just not much more than that. And they'll go with it. If they need to fill that slot, they'll go with that. And you just do the best you can. Sometimes it's, I put in calls too, I'm waiting for calls back. Sometimes it's as bare as that.
Well,
Do I lose credibility? I don't know.
I want to piggyback.
That's not for me to say.
The use of the phrase suspect, or person of interest, not suspect, person of interest. Usually at that time, in my experience, I'm not going to speak on behalf of all law enforcement agencies, but in my experience, when I've had to use that phraseology, person of interest, it's usually because the case is active, it's ongoing, and it's at its very most preliminary stage. And by the time I get on the scene, the PIO gets on the scene, and I'm talking to the incident commander and trying to get all of the information so that I can run back and tell the reporters who are waiting for this information. At that point in time, it was not ascertained as to who the victim was versus the suspect versus who just happens to be on the scene. So we have used the term, person of interest as a holding descriptor until we get more information and until we have confirmation as to who that person is and we can release that information.
One of you may know better than I, but I always thought that that term was a lawyered term that came about after Richard Jewell was arrested in the Olympic Park bombing, and he subsequently sued many media companies for about $40 million, which he won. And I think it was after that person of interest was used more than a suspect. Lisa, do you know that to be the case?
That I don't know. No, I learned from what you just told me.
Yeah, that was my understanding. A lot of the Atlanta Constitution, NBC News in particular, they lost a lot of money, but departments started using the term person of interest as opposed to suspect. And I assume that it was a lawyer term, one to save them money one way or the other. So we have to wrap up pretty soon, but I do want to ask about on the record and off the record. Has it ever been violated by a reporter for Lisa or Kerri? Or do you go on the record or off the record? If not, if you say, no, I don't do it, let's talk background.
I mean, there's some reporters that I have no problem with Susan, I'm sure, and Beverly was on the call I saw earlier. Because of my relationship and friendship, I will tell them things off the record, knowing that it helps them put together the big picture when they report on it. And then they know that there's only certain things that they can say on the record. But I know I have that trust and rapport, which is great. And there's others that I don't know that I will not say anything other than what can officially be on record.
Kerri?
As a rule of thumb, I generally do not say, off the record. I generally don't do that. I have a handful of reporters who I have a really great relationship with. I know that they'll ask the right questions, and they'll protect whatever information that we are discussing. But just as a general rule of thumb, if I say it, it has to be something that I feel comfortable with seeing reprinted or rebroadcast. That's just my way of dealing with things. If it came out of my mouth, I don't feel bad about it being reprinted.
Have you ever briefed a reporter? Well, do some PIOs brief reporters on background as opposed to going on the record?
I have.
You have? Okay.
I have.
And they can go ahead and use it. My entry level reporters, whenever they get jobs in the city, the first thing I tell them to do is I say, look, you're going to be covering the cop shop. Call the PIO, see if they'll go out with you for a cup of coffee. And that goes to what you guys mentioned about the relationships that you have with reporters. It helps in terms of flowing information to them. What type of advice would you be giving to a young reporter that was out there that had to deal with PIOs? How do they establish that relationship with someone like both of you, Kerri and Lisa? You guys are institutions. How do they approach you to start a rapport?
Lisa, you want to go first?
I think, because like I said, I've been doing it for so long. In the beginning, I was pitching stories when I used to do entertainment, public relations, even at the Red Cross, and I wouldn't get calls back. And then once I started working from the city, it's amazing that now the media needs me, which was great. And then you start building those relationships, as I mentioned so many times, in rapport. And again, they've turned into friendships to where, we'll go for coffee, we'll go out. And then with the PIO team for the city, we've gone to a few TV stations pre-COVID and listened to reporters and what they want to see and behind the scenes of how a newscast works, and it really helps put it all together in the big picture. And we have so many of our new PIOs are afraid of the media. They don't understand that they're your friends. You work with them. They're so afraid and intimidated. And that's how I was starting off. And until you really get to know them and talk to reporters, that's why these relationships, like we're doing tonight, it really helps both sides and moving in the future. And I hope we can do that even more. Like, I love mentoring new journalists, interns that we have in the office, and trying to help along the way, learning by what I'll say the mistakes I went through and how scared I was in this profession initially. But the more confident you are in a topic, the more you can portray it, and the more you can work with different reporters out there. And Claudia and I, we've had numerous conversations about other things personally too, with things going on in the neighborhood when she lived in town. So you start to, like I said, you establish those relationships that both professionally and personally help so much.
Kerri?
I just got to jump in because I'm afraid I'm gonna have to go back to to the funeral. So, but I just want to say how much I enjoy being on this panel, and I learned so much actually. So that's why I appreciate it very, very much. So thank you, SPJ, for including me and asking those great questions. I appreciate it greatly. So I'm just gonna go back in and pay my respects. So I apologize for cutting this short.
Well, that's
but good
okay.
to see you all.
We're closing out, unless Kerri, you have something to add on to what Lisa said.
Reach out, participate in societies like SPJ, PERSA, if you're in public relations, the Public Relations Society of America, join NABJ. NAHJ. Join some of these professional societies where you are rubbing shoulders and elbows with other colleagues, other media representatives, specialists, or reporters. You'll know what it is that they're looking for. You'll get to know their personalities, and that helps foster and maintain relationships.
Well, you know, this is a type of Zoom that I hopefully it is recorded. I'm sure it is, that can be used over and over. People can learn from it. I have, and Susan said she learned a few things, and maybe the public can learn a lot if they got a chance to sit down and watch this on a recording at some point. But this has been very fruitful, very helpful, and friendly, and antagonistic in a friendly way, if that makes sense. But thank you all for being part of this panel. And I want to turn it over to Ashanti Blaze Hopkins, the president of the LA chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists. And we'll move on from there. Ashanti? Well, maybe I won't turn it. Oh, there we are. 1 second. Let me try to.
No, because I'm muted. That
Okay.
is the key word of the pandemic, isn't it? I'm
Yeah.
muted. I just want to thank everyone, Professor Davis, Kerri, Lisa, Claudia, and also Susan, who had to leave us early. I think this was a wonderful panel. I think a lot of people probably got a lot out of this. We did record this panel, and so we will be posting this to our website. We'll also be pushing this out on social media. So if you happen to have come late or you weren't able to make it and you're watching this now at the very end, we did record it. So we'll make sure that everyone has that information. And I also want to echo something that Kerri said. You know, we encourage you to join us. You know, if you like this program, if this is something that you're interested, come join us. Help us create more of these types of programs. Help us, you know, in our mission to make sure that the constitutional task that we have been tasked with as journalists stays strong, and not just the state of California and Southern California and across the country. It's important, right? So I just wanted to thank everyone so much for attending tonight's panel. We have more programming coming up this year, so please stay tuned to both our website, spjla.org, and also our social media channels. Again, I encourage all of you to go to spjla.org and join us. Click on the Join tab. We would love to have you. We would love for you to be involved. And we look forward to seeing you all again for our next event that we have coming up. And we are also, heads up, we are also potentially hosting the regional conference for SPJ for Region 11 for this year. So stay tuned for more information on that as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you all soon.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.